Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Brittany. Nice to meet you. So at the time of filming this video, I am exactly 1 week away from my next haircut, which I am literally so excited for. So my last cut was in December. It has been 8 months since I've gotten my haircut. Corona kind of threw a wrench in my plans, but I thought this would be a good time to kind of walk you guys through what the experience is like at a curly cut, how does it compare to a wet cut, and then also kind of bring you along with a little bit of before and after. So the first half of this video is going to be informational, and then the second half, you're going to see the results from my latest haircut. And fingers crossed that I'm super happy at the end of this video, because your girls had some bad haircuts. But before we hop into this, if you are interested in all things curly, and you want to rock your best hair, make sure to hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit the bell if you want to be notified every time I post. So let's start with what is a curly cut and what is the difference between a curly cut and a wet cut. So a curly cut is interchangeable with the word dry cut. So it's exactly how it sounds. Your curls are cut dry. And the idea behind it kind of makes sense. Say I have two curls that are laying next to each other. When these curls are dry, they're at the same length. But when they're wet, one might be a little bit longer than the other because not all of my curls curl up the same amount. So it doesn't make sense necessarily to cut each curl the same amount. So that's kind of the idea behind it. You're going in with your dry curls. The stylist can see how your curls lay and cut them accordingly. Now, proponents of wet cuts say that a good stylist should be able to cut hair wet or dry and not really have an issue with curly hair when it's wet. And I kind of agree with this. If you're someone who's like, hey, I don't have someone who does curly cuts in my area, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You could still get a good haircut from getting a traditional wet cut. So let's talk about some of the experience differences because the order of operations in the salon is a bit different. All of you have probably gotten a typical wet cut. You get in, your hair is washed, you sit down in the chair with your hair wet, the stylist cuts and then styles your hair. Quick sidebar. If you're anything like me and you've gone to a traditional salon and asked to wear your hair curly at the end, you might have noticed that your stylist had no idea what to do with your hair. At a traditional non-curly salon, the stylist might take 2 pumps of mousse or gel, kind of scrunch it in your hair and be like, done. And you're just sitting there like, that's all the product you're gonna put in? At a curly salon, the experience is a bit different. The thing is, there's a huge gap in curly education when it comes to hairstyling. Most hairstyling textbooks do not include any real sort of curly education. So when you go to a curly salon, these stylists have not only completed a traditional hairstyling course, but they've gone on to complete further certification so that they know what to do and how to handle your curls. When you go to a curly salon, the first thing that happens is you sit down in the chair and the stylist starts cutting. After your hair is cut, then it's washed and styled, and it's styled curly, which is really, really nice to be able to walk out of the salon with your hair in its natural state. And so it's nice to go to someone who really knows what they're doing with your curls. If you're like me and you agree that there is a huge gap in curly education that needs to be filled and that probably all stylists should know what to do with curly hair and that a stylist shouldn't have to go and get additional certification to know what to do with your hair, click the petition in my bio because there are petitions going around to make sure that when hairstylists go to school, they get the proper education for your hair. So now that we know what the experience is like, let's talk about the different types of curly haircuts. Your stylist can go to a variety of different programs to receive their certification. So some that you may have heard of are Deva, We Dad, Rezo, and there are plenty others. Today I want to focus on Deva and Rezo because that is what I have experience with, and from what I've seen, at least in my area, those are the 2 most popular cuts. So pretty much the foundation of any curly cut is layers. Layers give your hair shape, volume, and it also kind of allows your curls to spring up more than they would if they were all the same length. Each of the different methods of cutting curly hair kind of go about the layers in a different way. So starting with DevaCut, which is probably one of the most well-known ways of cutting curly hair, they typically focus kind of like around your face. And that's definitely something I've seen and kind of noticed more as my hair has grown out. I don't really have layers in the back or like even kind of towards the back side. It's really here where my layers are. RezoCuts, on the other hand, are supposed to kind of be a little more even all the way around your head, so even kind of giving you layers in the back. The cut that I'm actually going to get at the end of this video is a RezoCut, so I'll be able to compare and contrast Deva versus Rezo, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think it's Rezo. The one thing that the creator of the RezoCut likes to claim is that the RezoCut will look good straight or curly. And that's a question I've gotten a lot. Can you straighten your hair when you've gotten a curly cut? Won't it look uneven? I've gotten probably 5 or so DevaCuts, and I blow out my hair like once a year. Haven't noticed any unevenness whatsoever. And I will caveat that, like, with a blowout, your hair kind of curls at the end. Maybe that's why I didn't see anything. I really wasn't noticing anything drastic, so from my perspective, that's not something you need to worry about. If you get a DevaCut, you can still straighten your hair. Okay, so you know what kind of haircut you're getting: a DevaCut, a RezoCut, one of the other types, or a wet cut. What do you say when you sit in the chair? So just like any haircut, I recommend bringing in some inspiration photos. That way you and your stylist can chat through kind of what you're looking for and get on the same page. Here's the picture that I'm going to be bringing in to my cut, but I recommend searching the Curly Girl Method hashtag, kind of looking at the pages of stylists online and finding a few examples of what you want. Next, I recommend having a conversation with the stylist and make it like as long of a conversation as you need to have to make sure you're on the same page about what you want. Make sure you know how much is being cut off, what kind of layering is being done. So typically I like long layers. I really don't like any layers that are like too short, and I've had layers that were literally this short before. Because I've had that experience, I know what to ask for. I can even tell the stylist, like, hey, I want the shortest layer to end here, for example. But short layers can also give you a lot more lift and volume, so make sure you kind of set those expectations with your stylist. What exactly do you want? So I showed you guys the pictures I'm going to bring in, but some of my other goals for this cut, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror as I say this, but my other goal for my hair is to kind of keep some of this length that I have. So I'm going to ask the stylist to not really touch the bottom layer at all. If anything, do a dusting, but I don't want the bottom layer to be trimmed. Top layers, yes, bottom layers don't really touch. So that's going to be my conversation, and we're going to go through what's realistic. If she's like, hey Brittany, I'm looking at your ends and I really don't think I can keep that much hair, like we have to cut it off, then I'm like, okay. But we have to have that conversation in the first place. Now I must stress that just because you're getting a curly cut, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed a good haircut. Once again, I must stress the importance of communication. Something else I want to bring up is if you've never gotten a curly cut before and you've never gotten layers before, it's going to be a little bit shocking. The first time I got layers, I literally hated it. I hated how I looked. I was like, this is the worst haircut I've ever gotten. But looking back at those pictures, I love how it looks and I love the volume that I got. So just keep in mind, if you're not used to seeing yourself with layers, it may take a little bit of adjusting to be like, oh my god, my hair is, you know, up here now and a little bigger. Okay, so we talked about the experience. We know about the different kinds of cuts. We know what you're gonna say, but how do you even find a stylist? So if you're gonna go with a DevaCut or a RezoCut, something similar, go on the websites of those programs and you should be able to find a stylist finder where you can type in your zip code and see stylists in your area. From that point, I would kind of do a little research on the salon, see the price range, look at their Yelp pages, see kind of what pictures they're posting, their Instagrams, and try to see if there's any place that kind of looks of interest to you. Now, if you can't find a curly salon in your area, or if you're going with a wet cut, what do you do? So once again, go to the Yelp or Instagram pages of the salons in your area and check to see what kind of hair they're working on. Now, most likely, if they're a salon that specializes in wet cuts, they're gonna show people with straight hair or blown out hair. So next, I would call to see if they have any experience with curly hair. Most likely they do. If the salon says that they use thinning shears or a razor on curly hair, absolutely stay away. I really would just try to be extra vocal with your stylist about what you're looking for. And then also, if you feel more comfortable getting a blowout at the end rather than walking out with like weird 2 squirts of mousse kind of scrunched in, that's totally fine. Getting your hair blown out when you get a haircut is fine. Now let's talk about price, because that's also a big determining factor for people. When I was going to salons in Manhattan, when I was still commuting in non-coronavirus times, I was paying anywhere between like $120 to $150, not counting tip. Now for the RezoCut that I'm going to, I'm paying $110, not counting tip. If a curly cut is not in your price range, do not worry about it. The best cut is a cut that you can afford. If what you can afford is a wet cut, do it and your curls are gonna look bomb. And lastly, how often should you be going to get a cut? Now, if you're looking to maintain your length, this would be every 3 to 4 months. At the moment, I'm trying to grow my hair out and my hair is relatively healthy, so I'm going like every 6 months in an ideal world. But this also really depends on how damaged your hair is. So if you have a lot of heat damage, chemical damage, you may have to go more often as your ends are splitting. So a good way to kind of know when you're due for a cut is when your ends kind of start to get a little scraggly, when they start to thin out a little bit. Even with my ends, it's not even that bad, but it's just kind of starting to be where I have these kind of pieces kind of hanging off rather than it being like a tight curl. So that's kind of my indicator that I should be going to get a cut again. All right, but that is pretty much that. So we are going to fast forward to next Tuesday and let's see how my cut went. Alrighty guys, made it through the storm. Here are my results from my cut today. Now you guys might be looking at this hair and saying, Brittany, I thought you didn't want short hair. What happened? We're gonna get into that. So finally got my hair cut. If you live in New Jersey, I went to the Graceful Hairstylist, and even if you don't live in Jersey, highly recommend following her on Instagram. Everything she posts is goals. But I got my hair cut by Hannah Grace, who is just like the nicest, sweetest person. So early in this video, you heard me stress how you really have to make clear to your stylist what you want. And honestly, Hannah is just such a good stylist. She went out of her way to make sure that she was on the same page as me. So I've been in situations with a lot of curly cuts where you just kind of sit down, the stylist stands behind you and they're like, what do you want? And that's kind of like the conversation. Like you just tell them and they're like, okay. Whereas the stylist that I saw today sat down facing me and started asking me questions, kind of wanted to know a little bit more about my curly journey, how I was styling, my goals for my hair, the problems that I have with my hair, which really just made me feel like she wanted to gather as much information as she could before she even went in with the scissors. So that made me feel super duper comfortable, and I didn't feel like I had to do as much explaining because she really was asking me the questions and leading that conversation. Whereas sometimes you might be in a situation where you have to lead the conversation with the stylist. So just keep that in mind. Now, the stylist that I saw today, as I mentioned, specializes in RezoCuts, but she actually kind of does a little bit more of a blended method, I found out. So while she does have Rezo certification, she kind of uses all of her training to cut my hair. I will say I'm not noticing like a drastic difference from other cuts that I've gotten. I think I have a couple more shorter pieces in the back and on the sides, but in general, it's not like, oh my god, I'm like drastically preferring Rezo over Deva. I think that they're comparable. This is the back. Here's the sides. So on the cut itself, like I mentioned, I didn't want a lot cut off. In fact, I really didn't want anything cut off on the bottom, and believe it or not, Hannah just didn't really touch the bottom at all. She cut pieces that were a little uneven. I have some hairs that grow a little faster than others, but she didn't touch the bottom. So actually, my hair is pretty much the same length that it was. Hannah is an Inner Sense stylist, so she used I Create Lift and I Create Volume on me, which, as you know, are two products that I absolutely love. She styled my hair soaking wet in sections. She didn't do any scrunching of my hair at all with a t-shirt, kept it soaking wet, and then went straight to diffusing. And that's kind of how she was able to achieve these like super duper chunky curls. But the one thing that we discussed is that because I never really diffuse to 100%, if you guys have followed me for a while, you know that I diffuse for a little bit, but then I like to air dry the rest of the way. So diffusing to 100% kind of gave me a little bit of extra shrinkage that I don't normally get. I will also mention that I made my next appointment for 6 months. We kind of talked about how my hair looked and how long she thought it was okay for me to go in between cuts, and she was like, I think 6 months sounds perfect for you. So I'm gonna get my next cut in February, and hopefully my hair's a little bit longer by that time, but like fingers crossed, you never know. So gonna take a little break, gonna fast forward a couple days to the next time I style. I'm probably gonna use the exact same products just so we have something to compare to, but I'll see you guys in a bit. Alrighty guys, so here are the final results. So like I mentioned, I ended up washing with the same products that were used on me in the salon. So Inner Sense I Create Volume and I Create Lift. And this is actually my day 2 hair. So super happy with how this is looking, and I actually like how you can see a little bit more of the shape today compared to how it was styled directly from the salon. I got a little bit more of a rounded look with kind of a tapered end. I have more volume and body on this side, so this is pretty much exactly what I was going for and looks very similar to the inspo that I brought in. I should mention that the way I styled my hair today is pretty different than the way it looked coming from the salon. And that's totally fine. The way your stylist does your hair is going to be different than the way you do your hair. It's just one of those things that comes with being a curly. We're probably gonna have to wait a couple days until we next wash our hair to really see what the cut looks like. But I should note that my stylist gave me a wash that was super duper long lasting and that I absolutely loved. I love both. I love what Hannah did, and I love what I do on a regular basis. I also want to note that I typically don't experience any sort of curl shock. So this is a phenomenon that a lot of curlies have noticed directly after they get their hair cut. It doesn't really curl correctly for the next couple washes. That's never something that I've really experienced. But if you end up getting your hair cut and you're like, wait a second, why are my curls like not forming correctly? That could be why. So just give it a couple washes, give it time, and hopefully you'll love your cut as much as I do. But I hope this video was helpful for you guys. I really tried to think through all of the questions that I had going into my first curly cut and tried to incorporate a lot of the questions that you guys had for me. So I hope this answered everything. But if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if there's anything else you want to see me cover, make sure to leave it in a comment down below. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, night, whatever time it is, and I'll see you guys soon.